people are happy that they came. Don't tell me that can't be. It can be. It must be. We will be blown all over the place, and our people will perish if we can't do this, if we can't put this together. It can be done. It must be done. And there are others, besides those who say you can't have both joy and controversy. There are others who are on their way to the controversy and feel no joy and spread no joy in the preciousness of our salvation. And one of the aims of this conference now for 14 years is to say very simply over and over and over again, it is possible and it is necessary to bring these two together. John Newton. I want to let John Newton be my excuse to say it again. To say it again. Newton would be the first to remind us that he has feet of clay. And so you hardly need reminding. He had his strengths and he had his weaknesses. In fact, some of his strengths were his weaknesses. And we'll see that, and that will be instructive. Our theme is the tough roots of John Newton's habitual tenderness. His great strength was his fulfillment of Ephesians 4:15. He spoke the truth in love. He made that the inaugural text in his installation at St. Mary's, Woolnoth in London in 1779. His last pastorate. 16 years in Olney, 27 years in London. And he began it with that text. It's a great sermon to read in volume 4 or 5. I'm not sure which it is. Now, as you listen to me unpack this, my caution is that you listen and ask, which side of the donkey are you falling off on? Do not listen saying, I wish the pastor across town were here for this. Okay? Just forget the other pastors in the room for right now. Which side are you falling off on? There are tender ones of you, and there are tough ones of you. We're all wired one way or the other. There are no balanced people in this room. And so, as you crawl up on the donkey, figure out how to stay there. Probably stop drinking would be one way. I want it to be personal. I want you to make some steps. I want you to advance. I want to advance. I'm doing this for me. You happen to be here to listen? I would have done this whether you were here or not. I read Biography for me. I want to change. I love that term, change agent. And my biggest frustration in ministry is what to do with people who don't want to change. I mean, to me, life is change. Life is quest for change. That's all life is a quest for change. If you're satisfied, what's the point of living? I mean, I don't understand people who have settled in. I just don't get it. So I'm on a quest here, and I hope you are. If you didn't come here on a quest to become more tough or more tender or more balanced or more something, I can't even compute with such a being. Now, Newton's life. I have 9 pages, and I'm going to try to collapse it into about 1 because I want to get to the substance of the issue. And so if I walk you through his life, that'll consume all the time we have, and I don't want to do that. So let me be real brief on his life. You can read his life in the books, and you can read the 9 pages in here on his life. His mother was a devout Congregationalist and taught her son the whole Westminster Catechism before he was 6 years old. And then she died and left him to a stepmother who was irreligious and a father who was irreligious, and left him to himself, and he became a real wretch, as he calls himself in Amazing Grace. Went to school 2 years out of his entire life and never had any theological education whatsoever. Zero. Ages 11 to 18, sailed with his father 5 voyages among the horrible conditions, as you can imagine, morally, on the ships. Age 18 to 20, a Navy midshipman. He had been arrested and conscripted and forced into the Navy, and he was an officer until he got so angry he deserted. They caught him, they whipped him, they stripped him of his officer's rank and put him in a low level. Finally, they got so fed up with this guy, they put him off the ship, and for 2 years he was isolated on the west coast of Africa, virtually a slave, worse than the black slaves, which later he was to haul around on the boats, to his everlasting shame thereafter. But he was a slave for 2 years, and through a remarkable providence, smoke going up and a boat stopped, and it happened to be the boat on which there was a letter from his father. It's just an amazing thing. One providence after the other in this man's life. On this boat, which he got on, heading home indirectly, took about 11 months to do it because they went to the West Indies first. March 21, 1748. Mark that day. He marked it every day with fasting and prayer for the next 59 years, till he died. And it was the day of the storm at sea. And he said, I endeavor to observe the return of this day with humiliation, prayer, and praise. He said that in 1805, 2 years before he died and 57 years after it happened. The storm was horrific. The boat was sinking. Could go into a lot of very interesting detail. He writes it all in his authentic narrative, which you can read in the memoirs. And God gets a hold of him and wakes him up from his blaspheming life. But remarkably, I think most of the stories that are told don't get it right. He did not view this as his conversion. He said, though he was stunned, swearing dropped out of his mouth. He read the Bible for 2 weeks till they landed in Ireland. His life changed dramatically. He became very serious about religious things. He said, I was greatly deficient in many respects. I acknowledged the Lord's mercy in pardoning what was past, but depended chiefly upon my own resolution to do better for the time to come. There's enough to inspire a book called Future Grace in that sentence. Let me say it again. I acknowledged the Lord's mercy in pardoning what was past, but depended chiefly upon my own resolution to do better for the time to come. I cannot consider myself to have been a believer. Wow. That wipes out half the people in our churches. Till a considerable time afterwards. Probably 6 years. For 6 years after this time, he said, I had no Christian friend or faithful minister to advise me. All those people he befriended later, they didn't come on the scene yet in his life. He becomes the captain of a slave trading vessel for about 6 years, which later he wrote. Read this if you wonder where he stood on that issue. Thoughts upon the African slave trade, which at the end he called a commerce so iniquitous, so cruel, so oppressive, so destructive as the African slave trade. And he joined hands with William Wilberforce to end it, and it did end. So he looks back with great remorse upon that horrific season of his life morally, even though many people say he was a Christian during that time, and he did not see it that way. He was still very much in the dark. He married Mary. He loved her so passionately. It's an amazing love story that it would be wonderful to go into, but I won't go into it. The memory of her, which was never out of his mind for all those years while he was a teenager, from 16 to 23 at least, he thought of her every hour, and that memory held him back from many things. Married 1750, same year his father died, drowning in the Hudson Bay. I'd love to talk about his relationship with his father. It was not good. He said, I have reason to believe that my father loved me, though he seemed to make every effort not to show it. Then came the epileptic seizure.